This is Basic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
He didn't have anybody to back him up, but he had a stun gun. He had that in his pocket, and he walked up to Shlomo and grabbed him, took out the stun gun, and just sparked it in his face.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Surfer Bob, real first name Carlos, ran the Pipeline BBS, an Atari bulletin board system that offered Warez for download, that is, pirated software. This interview took place on January 28, 2016. I guess my first question is, are we going to call you Surfer Bob or your real name, or how do you want to do this?
You can introduce me as Carlos, also known as Surfer Bob. That would be fine.
Okay.
Although, it's funny, when I was a kid, people would call the house and ask for Bob, which confused my mom for a while. Who's this Bob person?
What'd you tell her? Just all my strange computer friends call me Bob.
Yeah, I had to, educate her about handles and.
So you're first of all, before we even start, your main thing was you were a Warez Sysop, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
My bulletin board was mostly Warez, but I dabbled in a bit of everything, really. I was interested in everything there was to learn on the modem. I was going to say the internet, but we didn't have the internet back then.
Sure.
So,
okay.
I'd always been, a tinkerer, even, as a kid, growing up. Really, the whole thing spawned out of a passion for games. I always loved playing pinball, going to the arcade and playing those early arcade games that weren't even video games. They were, I guess they call them mechanical games. So, like these tank games and the shooting gallery games. Those just really caught my attention, and there wasn't much for me out where I grew up. It was really the sticks. So I was in the country, and those types of entertainment were unique. And then I remember going to a pizza dinner after a baseball game and playing Lunar Lander for the first time, and that really sort of blew me away. That was my first, I think, video game that I experienced. And then, of course, Asteroids and Space Invaders, and those games really, caught my attention. And so, I'd always loved games. And, it's kind of come full circle. I ended up working for Atari in 2011 and 2013. So it was kind of like, being a fan and then going back and working on, with these same things that I grew up with, working, on Atari's greatest hits for mobile. And then Atari at the time had the Dungeons and Dragons license. So, two big things from my childhood, Atari and Dungeons and Dragons. It's really quite, an honor to be able to work on those things. I can't think of, many other opportunities that would come up like that, working somewhere else. So, it was a hobby, that turned into a career, because that's what I do, is I make games for a living. So it was a passion that I've had and still have had for games. And
nice.
I think it started like probably with most kids with a 2600 and lots of games there, and spent a lot of time at other friends' house playing games on big 25-inch TV at the time, picture tube TVs. And then he got a ColecoVision, and then the neighbor up the street got this Atari 800, and I had read about them, but they were so expensive. I grew up in a single parent home with my two brothers, and so money was tight, and I could never dream of having a machine like that. And I think the first night he brought home the machine, they had it set up on their kitchen table, and we played some Scott Adams text adventures, and it just blew me away. Like, what? You can this was like choose your own adventure. You just type in stuff and you tell it what you want. I mean, it was like my imagination just opened up. Like, God, the possibilities are. I mean, I can't even express to you what it was. It was so new that I just had never seen anything like it before. And I pined for one for years and years. And I think finally, in about 83 or so, my mom took me down to Long's Drugs, and we bought an Atari 800 and the cassette drive, the tape drive, and I think that was like I think it was like $900. I remember thinking, God, I hope they don't come and repossess this thing, because I mean that was a lot of money, at the time. Like my mom really, I mean she must have saw something in me, but that's how I got my first Atari, and it wasn't long after that I realized the tape drive was nowhere. I mean I think we got a couple games on cassette. Cabins of Mars, I think, was one of the first games I got on cassette. I mean, it took like 20 minutes to load off the cassette, and sometimes it wouldn't load. And then I learned to program BASIC and saving and C loading, and the cassette just sucked. And my neighbor had the 810 disk drive, and it was such a different experience being able to load stuff off disk. And he had so many games. I was like, I wish I could get some of those. And so finally, she bought me an 810 drive, and I built my system up slowly after that. I think I saw him get a modem, and I heard this thing about modems and like you could get games for free. And so again, I saved some money that Christmas and got a 850 interface, and then I got the Atari acoustic modem, and I had that for about 3 days and realized the acoustic modem was garbage. Like, I mean, someone would, say something. My brothers would be fighting and that would screw up the connection, or my mom would come in and talk to me and screw up the connection. And so I got rid of the acoustic modem and then got a Hayes 300 baud modem. And that's where I started.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started calling bulletin boards, and that first month I went crazy. And I mean, I called England and Australia. I called all
you
over.
You were in Southern California somewhere, right?
Yeah, in Southern California, and I think I was 12 and a half, 13 years old at the time. So I didn't have a job. I wasn't a paper boy. I didn't have any money. I had a nice BMX bike, a Diamondback with analog aluminum anodized aluminum rims and 3-piece cranks, and it was.
They're probably analog too.
Well, the bike was analog, sure, and it was a super nice race bike. Anyhow, that first phone bill came back after calling a bunch of different bulletin boards, and I hadn't really gotten anywhere. I didn't get any pirate wares. I didn't have anything. I was just exploring and just calling and meeting new people, and it was so exciting. And anyways, that first phone bill was, I think it must have been $600, $650, something like that, almost $700.
Yikes!
And I couldn't believe it. Like, what? Well, I ended up having to sell that bike to pay for part of that phone bill. So no more bike for me. So sold my bike, I think $300, and my mom got the other half, and that was it. No more long distance calling. So that's when I got the idea as well. Why don't I set up a bulletin board and have people call me instead? And so that's where it all started, was to get around having long distance bills. So out of necessity, I went and found a bulletin board that had some shareware software and downloaded Amos software, the Amos BBS software. It was pretty crude. I mean, it had message boards, not much else.
And was this the pipeline, or did that come later?
It wasn't. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of what it was going to be. I was still going around the boards as like Redbeard, like a very not original name. Everybody was the pirate names, and so when I first set up the board, it was like a pirate ship kind of theme. I forget exactly what it was, but I think it was Redbeard or something. And I don't know, just something about it just didn't resonate, with me. I tried it for a little while, and I had this Amos, like I said, I had this Amos bulletin board system that was so crude. Like I had to hard code user names and passwords into a string file at the end of the basic program that was the bulletin board. So there wasn't even like disk access for storing usernames or passwords. And I ended up scrapping Amos, and someone turned me on to Forum, and so that's what I started running was Forum. Forum was really just a more advanced version of Amos, but I was familiar enough with the code that I could go through and change the strings, and so I started getting creative with changing things, and that's when I decided to pick something. I had just seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and so this character Jeff Spicoli just kind of stuck out in my mind, and so he was always sort of like in my head. That's who Surfer Bob was this Jeff Spicoli character, and Surfer Bob just kind of seemed like it's a silly name. I enjoyed the beach. I went to the beach quite a bit as a kid. Would spend weeks down there during the summer and boogie boarding and all that, but. I thought, that sounds good. Surfer Bob and Bonsai Pipeline, was the hottest thing back then, as far as, and probably still is, as far as surfing goes. And the pipeline kind of has that other connotation, like this is your Warez pipeline, but really it was just the pipeline, just the actual, wave, the surf spot pipeline.
So did you start it with the intention of it being a Warez board, or did it grow into that?
Well, that was my whole intention of getting a modem to begin with. Was I was on the hunt for free software. That was my goal. So
yeah,
having Warez on there was the intent. I was never shy about that. I certainly wasn't going to be a public domain bulletin board. I just was a kid. I didn't really have.
Was this a 24-hour board or one of those crappy boards where you could only call after the parents went to bed?
Well, that's how it started. I commandeered the house phone number, and so it started out as it would be up between 5 and 5 in the morning, and that drove my mom crazy because we had other phones hooked to the line, so the phone would just ring at all hours of the day and night, and then people obviously wouldn't know about the different. The specified hours, and would call outside the hours, and that's where they would call and ask, "Oh, calling for the pipeline. Is Bob there?" So my mom didn't know who this Bob person was. She's like, these people that keep calling for this Bob person. Who is this Bob person? I said, "Oh, that's me. That's I go by a different name on the bulletin board." And so she learned who Surfer Bob was after the first month, and. After the first month, things started to pick up, and so my mom said, "This is ridiculous. People can't get through to our house. I'm always answering the phone. Why don't you just take this line and I'll just get a different phone number." So I ended up just taking over the house line, and she got a new number, and so that's when the bulletin board went 24 hours. And I had some early sort of tutelage from some of the more well-known freakers and hackers of the day. I remember, probably 2 or 3 months after starting my bulletin board, this guy, Eric Bloodaxe from Austin, Texas, called me, and we were, you would log into the bulletin board, and if I didn't know who you were, it'd take a day or so for me to get you validated. But, I just happened to be around when this guy logged in, and so I popped in to chat with him while he was getting into the bulletin board after he signed in, and we started chatting directly, just text, just like you do right now in instant messenger or on your iPhone, and just texting back and forth to each other. And he says, "Well, you should call my bulletin board." I said, "Well, I can't really, I just don't have the money to call long distance." He said, "Oh, don't you know about phreaking?" And I'd never heard about phreaking. I said, "No, I don't know what is that." He's like, "Oh, well, there's this long distance companies that have long distance services where you enter in a code and you can call, long distance. And if you get somebody's number, you can call for free. And so he introduced me to phreaking. And so, I still ran the bulletin board, but then I got into scanning for codes and then calling other bulletin boards and advertising. And that's kind of how, the bulletin board started to take off, as I call other pirate boards. And since I had a board, I had some credibility as a sysop, and then I would offer access on my board for access on their board. And so it kind of worked out that, having a bulletin board gave you sort of a leg up on just the regular users who didn't have, a bulletin board. Plus, I had my friend up the street. I don't know what connections he had, but he got software, pre-release software, somehow. He was in the movie industry, but he was also an engineer, and this guy was pretty bright. I mean, he developed his own version of a happy drive. Like, he has his own little circuit, and he kind of took me under his wing. He's a much older man. He had a stepson that was my age, but stepson wasn't really interested in computers and that sort of thing. And I was interested in computers and electronics. And so, when I got my 810 drive, he said, come on up and, we'll work together in my shop and I'll show you how to put together how to install a happy chip into your drive. And he also had this 3-digit tachometer that he developed, a circuit for the 810 drive. And it was so awesome. The digits were just big enough that they fit behind the little Atari symbol on the 810 drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had a little potentiometer, and then I built that tachometer that went on so I could adjust the speed of the drive, and it came in handy because there was some pirated software some software that was copy protected and could only be copied if you slowed the drive down to a certain speed. So it came in handy, but it was more for show than anything. And it was almost like my BMX bike. I tricked it out. I had all rims, different colored cranks and pedals, and I did the same thing with my machine. Tricked it out with the tachometer and the happy drive, and changed the color of LEDs, and added all these little things. I mean, it was really was a special kind of thing. And so anyhow, he got free software from somewhere, I don't know where. And I remember he got Ball Blaster and Behind Jaggy Lines.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the pre-release names of Ball. I think the final names were Ball Blazer and Rescue Tackless. Those were the LucasArts games. And so I had those before anybody, and that was like a big score. That was a big scoop, and that really bought me a lot of goodwill with the pirate boards in this area and around the country, really. So I went around and I uploaded those things and said, you want more? Come to my board. So that's kind of how I set the hook and got a lot of users to come in with those two games. And then I started getting wires from people that ran in different circles. There was like Glenn the 5200 man, and I'd get not directly from him, but people that ran in that circle would come. And so it seemed like there were these different groups or factions or cliques or whatever that had access to different software. So it was kind of nice. Right now it's so ubiquitous that everybody has everything right at the same time. Then it took a while for stuff to move around, and it depended on who you knew. And so there were different boards in the LA area that I would frequent, and a few boards back east that I frequent in the Midwest, and some in like Florida, and some in Texas, some in Canada, and not too many in Europe. I think there were maybe one or two in Europe that I would call, but that was pretty much it. I'd do the rounds, and people do the rounds, and I would take the new software and put it on my board, and whatever I had new that they didn't have, I'd upload it to their board. And so that's just kind of how the whole thing started. So it was being a sysop, but also being a pirater, or being a distributor, or however you want to look at it. That was fun. It was about the games because I always loved checking out and playing the new games, and the chase was part of it. But really, it was always about the games. I mean, now that I can afford to buy games, I buy them. I mean, I don't really have the time to pirate them or the desire to pirate them, but that's what it was about. And then there was community. It was fun meeting folks, and I was naive, and it was a different time back then. But I met a lot of interesting people as Surfer Bob, and some people just thought my name was Bob, and I wouldn't correct them and would just go with it, even in real life when I meet them, they just call me Bob, and I had some interesting adventures. I remember these kids thought they were tough, and there were like these. I talk about factions earlier, but there were these warring groups of BBS kids. I don't really know how else to explain it. But you would talk shit, and they would say, "All right, let's meet at the Los Angeles, computer enthusiasts, the Atari computer enthusiasts meeting, next week, and we'll settle this." And so there was a church out in the valley, San Fernando Valley, where they held the LACE meetings. And so the adults were inside, and on the outside, there were a bunch of kids. There were more kids on the outside than there were adults on the inside. And I'm sure the adults were wondering, what was going on out in the parking lot. They probably had no idea that it was all the little Atari kids that were, running bulletin boards were out there getting ready to, have a gang fight. Imagine that.
I love the idea of first of all, going to a church to probably pirate software and to fight. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was surreal, really. So there was this one, the one side was for this one kid, Shlomo, and he ran, I think, the Twilight Zone bulletin board out in the valley, and then the other faction, which I was hanging with that group, was on this guy. His name. He went by the moniker of ATP2, Atari Pirate 2. He ran the Wasted Land bulletin board. And those two were supposed to, go down there and have fisticuffs and fight. And Shlomo showed up with his brother and some dudes from his brother's football team. And, Rob, who was ATP2, showed up. And he didn't have anybody to back him up, but he had a stun gun. And those were like brand new back then. And he had that in his pocket, and he walked up to Shlomo and grabbed him by the lapel or by the shirt collar and took out the stun gun and just like sparked it in his face. And everyone couldn't believe it and called him every name under the sun because he came with a weapon. But that's not the end of it. So Rob walked away and Shlomo walked away, but Shlomo and his friends just kept egging Rob on. And this Rob, ATP2, opened up his trunk, and he had a gun in there. And this guy was out of control. He had a gun in there. He's like, "Should I just shoot it over in there and just scare him? Are you crazy?" "Oh, it's okay. It's only rubber bullets." It's like, "No, man, that's you're out of your mind." But I should have known this guy was kind of out there because I had gone over to his house before this happened to trade software, and had spent the night, and we copied discs all night long. I brought a big stack of stuff, and he had a bunch of stuff, and we just traded, copied all night long. And then in the morning, someone comes knocking at the door at 7 a.m, and he gets really paranoid. He's like, "No," he lives in Calabasas, and so it's like a very exclusive neighborhood. So people, I guess, generally don't come knocking at the door at 7 a.m. So he got very paranoid, and he opened the drawer, and he had a big hunting knife that he pulled out of his desk. And he goes to answer the front door with the knife behind the door, and he comes back and says, no one was there. Well, you fast forward a year or so, Rob is on the news. He's wanted for murdering some kid. This guy was uh, he was gay, and no one knew this, but his brother and this kid outed him, and to his parents. I guess they followed his brother and this other kid that he killed, followed Rob and his friend or whatever to their beach house and saw Rob and this other guy having relations, and they came back and spilled the beans to Rob's dad, and Rob was furious, and he went out and took his mother's credit card and bought an Uzi and waited for this kid and mowed him down in the middle of the street. And so Rob went to prison. He went to San Luis Obispo prison for, I think, 17 years. I think he got out in the early 2000s, but he was in there for 15 years.
This is the guy you're hanging out with, pirating software.
This was a guy that I was hanging out with, pirating software. It's just, you never know. Like I said, I was naive. I didn't know, I didn't know any better. I mean, I just figured everybody was cool, and I didn't think people were, had mental issues. And for all I know, he could have been trying to pick me up. I had a user on my board, which I think was Rob, probably, would always try to seduce me, and I knew it was a dude, and it's like this person would just talk, sex talk to me. It's like, okay, dude, I can't, I'm not down with this. I mean, I was never a jerk. I mean, everybody could do whatever they wanted, and that was fine by me, but that's just wasn't my thing. But this person was persistent. I'm sure it was Rob, because after he went away, so did this other person, Madam X. That was that person's handle, Madam X. Huh. But I met a ton of cool people. People are very nice. They'll help you out. Share information. Tell you how to do stuff. I mean, it was a great community, and still some of my closest friends are people that I met as a kid running pipeline.
Nice. I just want to interject that I went to Calabasas High, so I was probably a stone's throw from all that mess that you were involved with.
Yeah, this was I don't know how old you are, but yeah, this was like, I think 85 or something. This has happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, we went down and even saw the divots in the street where he shot the kid, after he had fallen. Yeah, it was pretty messed up. But I mean, happier things came out of that. Like I said, met a lot of friends, played a lot of games, and it really was a special time. Everything was new. Everything was, there were just endless possibilities, and I think that was what was so exciting about getting into the computer so early. It was like no one else knew what this other world was, this other identity that I had, who that was, and the kind of things that I was learning and exploring and creating. I think that was a big draw of the bulletin board, was just the creativity and modifying it and making it my own.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, you don't have much that's your own, that you have control of. And here I was at 13, 14 years old, and I have adults calling my bulletin board. I have people from all over the world calling my bulletin board, and being respectful. They didn't care that I was a kid, and I didn't care who they were on the other end either. It was just about, hey, we're in this cool thing, BBSing and trading games. I mean, I didn't even really consider it like, oh, I'm a pirate, ho ho ho, that kind of thing. It was just like, hey, we're just, you probably don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money, and let's just trade some games. And to me, that's what it was about.
Yeah. Did you ever have any legal run-ins or any scares on the legal front with the piracy?
No, I never had any problems with that. I've had plenty of friends go to jail, go to prison, get called by get called or visited or taken away by the Secret Service and FBI for freaking and hacking and credit card fraud. But I never had any problem with that. I mean, I tried to distance myself from those things, and maybe I'm to blame for some of those folks going away. Not because I was a rat or anything, but when I learned how to scan for long distance codes, I knew that wasn't something viable long term. So I taught some of the kids on the bulletin board how to do it. And I said, I'll give you access. I'll show you how to scan the codes. You scan the codes. You give me a couple codes every month, and I'll give you access to the bulletin board. And
so they're doing it from their home phone, so you don't have to do it from your home phone.
So I diversified.
Oh,
yeah. So I was kind of, it's probably the bad seed and got some of those kids in trouble. But I would trade just about anything for access to my bulletin board, anything that was of value. So if you didn't have software, if you had some tools, or you had I don't know, if you had some pot, you had some lottery tickets or whatever, I wasn't picky. If it wasn't something I wanted, it was probably something somebody else wanted that I could trade. And so there was a barter system that, if you didn't have software to trade, there were other ways that you could get access to the bulletin board and to the wares. So it also became a little source of income for me as a kid, which, helped. I mean, I never got rich or anything, and, it probably was, lost money in the long term if you think about, how much, hardware cost and, how much, phone bills and
Sure.
those sort of things. But, I didn't do it for the money. If anything, it helped pay for itself. Because, after getting an 810 drive, that wasn't enough space because I would be there. Someone would want to look at files, and I'd have to pop the disk out right at the right time and then jam a disk in with some files on it. I mean, that's like how hands-on I was early on. I mean, I was really there at the bulletin board, watching it almost every minute that it was up, because it was exciting, and plus it needed me to be there. Then later on, after I got more drive space, it was a little more automated. So I got like an Indus GT drive, so I could have a bulletin board and some files at the same time. And then graduated from an Indus GT to a Percom drive, and I had two double density drives on there, which was like phenomenal. Like, oh my God, that's a ton of storage, even though they were only 88. It was like 160K each or something like that. But that was still a lot of space. You could put a lot of software on two double density disks. So, as it, went on, it got more and more automated where I didn't have to babysit it, but I was still tweaking and tuning it and, modifying it with spinning cursors and secret areas that required passwords and, text file areas with information, like freaking and hacking information, and anarchy files, and which some of them are even on the internet today still. If you look for pipeline BBS 805-526-5660, which was the number, you can find those files. They're funny to read. Just how to make. How to make how to make a bomb like out of Drano, which I did. So all of these things have been tested by me. I ended up killing the lemon tree in the backyard with the Drano bomb because just got all that Drano got all over the lemon tree, and
it wasn't actually an explosion. It was just the Drano.
The bottle exploded and it got all over but it was a plastic Pepsi bottle, but it got all over the lemon tree, and the lemon tree died from the Drano. Yeah, not from the explosion, right?
Right.
And so it was about sharing of information. That's really what it was. It was about the games, but sharing information, any kind of information that I thought that interest me, and I thought if it interests me, other people would be interested in it. And so that's what it was like. It was fun, and I think the 8-bit BBS ran for about 5 years, and then I moved to an Atari ST. The BBS moved, along to an Atari ST, and the final incarnation was running on a PC. One multi-line. I had at the height. I had 4 lines. I had an ISDN line and 3. I forget. Whatever the highest one, 28K or 36K lines. But then the internet came along, and there just wasn't a need to have bulletin boards anymore. So I think around 95, 90, 90, maybe 97, I don't know, somewhere in there. It's kind of a blur, 95, 96, 97. Somewhere around there, I took the board down for good.
That was the fate of many boards around that time.
Yeah, and I kind of wish I had kept, some of that stuff. I sold the 8-bit, and all, I wish I had like my bulletin board software just so I could look through, the names of, all the folks that had been on there, and even some of the stuff that I created for the bulletin board, I missed. I created some stuff by accident, like, I did some. I was messing around in a terminal program, and I had the chat log still turned on from talking to someone. I was just kind of messing around, moving the cursor around, and then I saw the chat log was still on, so I closed it. And then I played it back, and then I saw the cursor moving around, and so I got the idea of, well, maybe I can do some animations with this. And so I created like little ASCII movies. And one of the first movies, of course, that I made was a Fast Times at Ridgemont High movie with a scene where Jeff Spicoli comes into the classroom and has a pizza, and Mr. Hand, takes the pizza and gives it to the rest of the class. And so I made little movies, and just something that I just discovered on accident. I'm sure other people discovered it before me, but I thought I was the first one that, in my own little world, to discover that. So I made these little movies and then put them up there, and people enjoyed them. So I made some more. I wish I had those. I don't have those anymore. They're long gone. I see other people's stuff, and it's fun to watch it. But I wish I had mine. I'm sure they're on a disc somewhere out there. I gave it to some guy who was my 8-bit. I gave it to some guy who was a historian, but I forget. I don't know. I've lost contact with this guy, but. And he's got my 800 with Omnimon. That was something that I'd used a few times to break a couple games. But I would never consider myself a coder or a Warez hacker. I had a friend who was more adept at that than I was. But if it was easy enough to go through and find the routine that was looking for a bad sector on a disk, then I could, no-op that and get around it. But I'd never really considered myself a Warez cracker. So I'm sorry I'm jumping all around, but
no, it's fine.
I hadn't talked or thought about this stuff in years, so it just kind of comes back as I start talking about it.
I have that effect on people. Great. Well, is there anything we haven't talked about that we should have?
Well, there's going back to the community elements, a lot of folks that I had met, we didn't have, like I said, we didn't have the internet to get on, Skype and whatever, team chat, all those kind of, things where you can have a party line. And so, some of the things that we would do is get on Alliance teleconferencing. I don't know if anyone's ever talked to you about Alliance teleconferencing, but that's where we kind of had, our little powwows. Everybody from across the country would get a call from somebody who started the conference line, and we would all hang out, talk about what's going on, and just joke around, all night long, hanging on this conference line. It was all what we thought were the big guys, or the sysops from other bulletin boards, and the big users, and from the different locations around the country. And that's where I met some of the folks that I still talk to today. So Missing Link, these guys, Frozen Ghost, The Enchanter, Atari Freeze, like these are all folks that would hang out on this conference lines, and we would chat and talk, and what you got new, what's going on, and swap stories and just goof around. Yeah, it was something new, and I mean, I just have to keep saying that over and over again because it was all brand new. I mean, now all this stuff is commonplace. Facebook, and everything that is on the internet came about because of what we trailblazed early on. On bulletin boards and modems, and now it's family friendly and easily accessible, where even my mom can get onto the internet. But
Yeah.
that's it. That's my story. There's lots more to it, but those are the broad strokes. And
Nice.
I miss it. I do miss it. I enjoy the internet, but it's not as magical as it was back when everything was all brand new. And I'm sure folks that were around at the time that I was an 8-bit understand what I'm talking about when I say that it was definitely a different time, and it was special.
Yeah, it was. Awesome.
So thanks, thank you for giving me a chance to talk, Kevin. It's been nice.
Well, thank you, Surfer Bob. This is great.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.